They say money cannot buy happiness, but it certainly buys silence, something I have craved for 3 decades. Today, I stand before the mansion my father banned me from, but I'm not here to apologize for my useless art. I am here as their creditor, my parents, who laughed at my $50 first sale. Now hold my loan agreement with trembling hands. Before I sign the check they are desperate for, let me take you back to the party where they tried to publicly destroy me. My name is Danica Prescott, and if there is one thing I have learned in my 32 years of life, it is that hope is a dangerous thing. It is the only reason I was standing in the foyer of my parents' estate in Oak Creek, clutching a clutch purse that I had bought at a thrift store 5 years ago. Trying to blend into the wallpaper, the invitation had arrived 3 days prior. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with gold leaf lettering, the kind of stationery that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. It was an invitation to celebrate the promotion of Vanessa Prescott to the position of director at Ethelgard Global. My sister, the golden child, the financial prodigy who, at 28 years old, was apparently conquering the corporate world while I was still, in the eyes of my family, playing with crayons. I should have thrown the invitation in the trash. I should have stayed in my studio, wrapped in a blanket, working on the commission that was currently driving me crazy. But the text message from my mother, Sylvia, had followed the mail. Please come, Danica. It would mean so much to your father. We want the whole family together. That "we" was a hook, and I was the foolish fish that bit every single time. I wanted to believe that time had softened them. I wanted to believe that my sister's success would make them magnanimous, that there was finally enough room in their pride for both of us, even if my portion was just a crumb. The air inside the mansion was cold. Despite the hundreds of bodies filling the grand living room, it smelled of expensive lilies, stale champagne, and that specific, sharp scent of old money that I had spent my entire adult life trying to scrub off my skin. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. Keeping my head down, the guests were the usual suspects. There were my father's business partners from the real estate firm, men with firm handshakes and wandering eyes. There were my mother's socialite friends, women whose faces were pulled so tight by surgery that they looked perpetually surprised. And then there were Vanessa's colleagues from Ethelgard Global, a younger, hungrier breed of sharks in bespoke suits. Danica. I turned to see Aunt Carol, my father's sister. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my dress. It was a simple navy blue piece, respectable but clearly not designer. You came, she said, sounding disappointed. I thought you were busy. Painting. It is good to see you too, Aunt Carol, I said, keeping my voice even. Well, try not to cause a scene tonight, she whispered, leaning in close. This is a big night for your father, and for Vanessa, of course. Before I could respond, the lights in the room dimmed. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the grand staircase. My father, Robert Prescott, stood at the top landing. He was 60 years old, but looked 50, a man preserved by ego and the best healthcare money could buy. Beside him stood my mother, Sylvia, dripping in diamonds that caught the light like cold stars. And between them was Vanessa. My sister looked radiant. I had to give her that. She was wearing a silver gown that looked like liquid mercury. Her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves. She looked like a trophy. She looked like everything I was not. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice boomed over the microphone system. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our pride and joy. Applause rippled through the room. I clapped politely, my hands feeling heavy. Tonight, Robert continued, descending the stairs with his family, we celebrate excellence. We celebrate hard work. We celebrate the kind of success that builds legacies. They reached the bottom of the stairs and walked toward a small stage that had been set up at the front of the room. A large projection screen descended from the ceiling behind them. Vanessa has just been named the youngest director in the history of Ethelgard Global, my mother announced, beaming. She is managing portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. More applause. Vanessa did a little curtsy, a rehearsed gesture of humility that didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were scanning the crowd, and when they landed on me, her smile sharpened. It was a predatory look, a warning. However, my father said, his tone shifting, the music, a soft jazz track that had been playing in the background, cut out completely. The silence that followed was sudden and jarring. We are not just here to celebrate. We are a family that believes in transparency, and we have a situation that needs to be addressed. An intervention, if you will. My stomach dropped. I looked around, looking for an exit, but the crowd was too dense. I was trapped near the front, just a few feet from the stage. "Danica, please come forward," my father said. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. 200 pairs of eyes turned to me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a burning mix of shame and confusion. I didn't move. "Come on, Danny," Vanessa chirped, her voice amplified by the microphone she was now holding. "Don't be shy." I forced my legs to move. I walked to the edge of the stage, but I refused to step up onto it. I stood in the shadow of my family, looking up at them. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "This is reality, Danica," my father said. He clicked a remote in his hand. The projector screen behind them flared to life. On the left side of the screen was a professional bar chart titled Vanessa's Annual Yield. The bars were tall, green, and imposing. The numbers were in the millions. On the right side of the screen, a picture appeared. It was one of my illustrations. It was a piece I had done 2 years ago, a whimsical digital painting of a forest spirit. I remembered being proud of the lighting in that piece, now, projected 10 feet tall next to financial data. It looked out of place. It looked childish. "This," my father gestured to my art, "is what Danica has spent the last 10 years doing, doodling, drawing cartoons." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. I felt like I had been slapped. "And this," he pointed to Vanessa's chart, "is a real contribution to society. This is stability. This is power." "We tried to be supportive," my mother chimed in. Stepping forward, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her clutch. "We really did. We paid for that art school. Even when we knew it was a mistake, we paid for the supplies. We paid for the rent on that apartment you had in the city before you moved into... well, before..." She unfolded the paper. It was long. It looked like a receipt. "I have taken the liberty of itemizing the cost of supporting Danica's hobby over the last decade," Sylvia said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "Tuition $85,000, rent assistance $42,000, medical bills because she didn't have corporate insurance $12,000, allowance and miscellaneous expenses." She read down the list. Every mistake I had ever made, every moment of weakness where I had asked for help, was weaponized. She read out the cost of my braces from when I was 16. She read out the cost of a car repair from 5 years ago. "The total," my mother announced, looking at me with a look of pure disdain, "comes to $418,000.52. That is money we poured into a hole. Danica, money we could have invested, money that could have grown, like Vanessa's portfolio." I stood there, frozen. I couldn't breathe. The humiliation was total. It wasn't just that they were doing this. It was that they had an audience. They had invited people, strangers, business rivals, neighbors, to watch them flay their own daughter. Vanessa stepped forward, the picture of concern. She crouched down at the edge of the stage so she was eye level with me. She put a hand on my shoulder. Her palm was cold. "We just want you to wake up, Danny," she said softly into the microphone. "We're worried about you. You're 32 years old. You're living in Grandma's old shack. You're drawing monsters for pennies on the internet." "It's not pennies," I managed to choke out. "I make a living." Living." Robert laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. You call that a living? Look at your sister. That is a life. You are barely surviving. We have a solution, my mother said. We are not heartless. We are willing to forgive this debt, all $400,000 of it. We will wipe the slate clean. What? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. You need to get serious, Vanessa said. I spoke to the hiring manager at Ethelgard. We have an opening in the mailroom, or maybe the cafeteria. Honestly, you should start as a cashier. Learn the value of $1. Get a real job, like your sister. The crowd chuckled again. Get a real job. The words echoed in my skull. But, my father interrupted, we need collateral. We need to know you are committed to paying back this family for the resources you wasted. He pulled another document from his jacket pocket. It was legal-sized, thick, and bound with a blue cover. He held it out to me. This is a quit-claim deed, he said, for your grandmother's cottage. The world seemed to stop. The cottage, Grandma's house, it was a tiny, drafty place on the edge of town, miles away from this neighborhood. It was where I lived. It was where I worked. It was the only thing Grandma Eleanor had left to me. Specifically to me, in her will. She had bypassed my parents because she knew they would sell it. Sign the deed over to us, Robert said, his voice hard. We will sell the land. The developers are offering a fair price to expand the golf course. The proceeds will cover a portion of your debt to us, and in exchange, we will help you get that job at Vanessa's company. We will help you fix your life. I stared at the paper, then I looked at my father. His face was red, expectant. I looked at my mother. She was adjusting her diamond earring, looking bored, as if destroying my life was just another item on her party planning checklist. And then I looked at Vanessa. She was smiling. It wasn't a smile of sisterly love. It was a smile of triumph. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about my debt. She wanted the cottage, or rather, she wanted to take away the one thing that was mine. You want me to give you my home, I said. My voice was louder now. To pay for a childhood I didn't ask for. We want you to take responsibility, my father shouted, losing his composure for a second. Sign the paper. Danica, do it now, or walk out that door and never ask us for a single dime again. No health insurance help, no car repairs, nothing. You will be dead to this family. The room was silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. I looked around at the guests. I saw a man in a tuxedo checking his watch. I saw a woman whispering behind her hand to her husband. They were amused. This was dinner theater to them. My pain was their entertainment. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet, like a thread finally giving way under too much tension. For years, I had held on to the hope that if I just explained myself better, if I just showed them my art was valid, if I just loved them enough, they would love me back. But standing there, looking at the spreadsheet of my existence, I realized the truth. They didn't hate my art because it was bad. They hated it because it was mine. They didn't want me to succeed. They needed me to fail, so Vanessa could shine brighter. I was the designated loser in the Prescott family narrative. I reached out and took the document from my father's hand. He smiled. Good girl. I have a pen, right? I didn't take the pen. I held the thick paper up so everyone could see it. I looked my father dead in the eye. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. The tears I had shed for them over the last 20 years evaporated in the heat of my sudden, absolute clarity. You calculated the cost of raising me, I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the room. You put a price tag on being parents. $400,000. It is a lot of money. Sylvia sniffed. It is a bargain, I said, because it bought you the right to treat me like garbage for 3 decades. I gripped the top of the document. The paper was high quality, resistant. I had to use both hands. Rip! The sound was shockingly loud. My father's jaw dropped. Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What are you doing? Robert sputtered. That is a legal document. Not until I sign it, I said. Rip, I tore it again and again. I tore the quitclaim deed into jagged strips. I tore through the legal jargon, through the demands, through their control. I let the pieces fall to the floor, scattering over the expensive Persian rug like confetti at a funeral. "You want the cottage?" I asked, stepping back from the stage. "You will have to burn it down with me inside it, because I am never signing anything you give me. Not now. Not ever." "Danica!" my mother shrieked, stepping to the edge of the stage. "You are making a mistake. You are embarrassing us." "I am embarrassing you." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You just projected my dental records on a screen at a cocktail party. You have no shame left to lose. Mother." I turned my back on them. "If you walk out that door," my father roared into the microphone, his voice distorting with feedback, "you are cut off. Do you hear me? You are nothing without us. You will starve in that shack." I stopped. I didn't turn around. I just spoke, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "I would rather starve alone than eat at your table one more time." I started walking. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea, but not out of respect. They recoiled, as if my rebellion was contagious, as if poverty and defiance were diseases they could catch. I heard Vanessa's voice behind me, shrill and desperate to regain control of the narrative. "Let her go. She's mentally unstable. We tried. Everyone. You saw that we tried?" I kept walking. I walked past the Champagne Tower. I walked past the ice sculpture of the Ethelgard Global logo. I walked through the heavy oak doors and out into the cool night air. My car, a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear bumper, was parked at the very end of the long driveway, hidden behind the Bentleys and Porsches so it wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. I got in, my hands shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. I looked back at the house. The windows were glowing with warm, golden light. Inside, the music had probably started again. They were probably laughing, shaking their heads, clinking glasses to their own benevolence and my stupidity. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally crushed me. But as I turned the key in the ignition and the engine sputtered to life, I didn't feel crushed. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the crushing weight of their expectations. I felt light. I felt empty. Yes, but it was a clean emptiness, a space waiting to be filled. "You will never see me again," I whispered to the rearview mirror. I shifted the car into drive and peeled out of the driveway. Leaving the gravel flying behind me, I had 418,000 reasons to hate them, but as I drove into the darkness toward the only home I had left, I realized I only needed one reason to succeed. They had dared me to get a real job. Fine, I was going to get the best job in the world, and I was going to make them pay for every single cent of that bill, not with money, but with the one thing they couldn't afford to lose their pride. The drive from the pristine, manicured streets of Oak Creek to the edge of town took 40 minutes, but it felt like traveling between two different planets. My tires hummed against the asphalt, carrying me away from the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, toward the only place on earth that had ever felt like home. Grandma Eleanor's cottage sat at the end of a gravel lane that the city snowplows often forgot in winter. It was small, clad in cedar shingles that had weathered to a soft, silvery gray. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, like a tired back, and the front porch leaned precariously to the left, to my parents. It was an eyesore, a blemish on the family portfolio. To me, it was a sanctuary. I parked my car next to the overgrown lilac bush and cut the engine. The silence that rushed in to fill the space was profound. There was no polite applause here, no clinking silverware, just the sound of crickets in the tall grass and the wind rustling through the ancient oak tree that guarded the house like a sentinel. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled of lavender, dust, and turpentine. It was the scent of my childhood, preserved in amber. I didn't turn on the lights immediately. I knew this house by heart. I knew that the third floorboard in the hallway groaned if you stepped on it. I knew exactly where the draft came in through the window frame in the living room. I dropped my purse on the worn velvet armchair and collapsed onto the sofa. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the confrontation at the mansion was draining away, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. My hands were still trembling. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I looked around the room. It was cluttered with canvases. Some were finished, leaning against the walls in stacks. Others were blank, waiting for a story. My easel stood by the north-facing window, a silhouette against the moonlight. This was my life. This was the doodling my father had mocked. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. They were always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the quiet moments to strike. Growing up in the Prescott household was like living in a theater where everyone had a script except for me. Vanessa was the star. She was born glowing. It seemed she had the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the easy laugh that charmed adults and made boys stumble over their own feet. I was darker, quieter, awkward in my own skin. I remembered being 16 years old. It was a Tuesday in November. I had come home from school with a gold ribbon pinned to my backpack. I had won first place in the state youth art competition. My charcoal portrait of an elderly man on a park bench had beaten 300 other entries. I felt a rare, fragile sense of pride. I walked into the kitchen, bursting to tell someone, but before I could speak, I saw the cake on the counter. It was a massive chocolate cake from the expensive bakery downtown. "Congratulations, Vanessa," was written in icing. My sister was sitting at the table, beaming. My mother was pouring sparkling cider into crystal flutes. "What happened?" I had asked, touching the gold ribbon on my strap. "Vanessa got a B on her history midterm," my mother announced, clapping her hands. "We were so worried she was going to fail, but she pulled through a solid B." "That is great," I said, my voice small. I won the state art competition." My father looked up from his newspaper. He glanced at my ribbon, then back at Vanessa. "That is nice, Danica, but let's focus on the real achievements. Vanessa worked hard for this grade." Later that evening, my father drove a brand new convertible into the driveway. It was red, shiny, and wrapped in a giant white bow. A reward for a B in history, a reward for mediocrity, as long as it was the right kind of person achieving it. I went to my room and tore the gold ribbon into tiny pieces. I didn't paint for 3 months after that. It was Grandma Eleanor who saved me. I opened my eyes and looked at the fireplace mantel. There was a photo of her there, taken a year before she passed. She was wearing her gardening hat, her face a map of wrinkles that came from smiling too much. She was the black sheep of the family, the one who married a carpenter instead of a banker, the one who chose happiness over status. 2 years ago, when the cancer finally took her, I felt like the anchor of my world had been severed, but she had left me this house, and she had left me something more important. I walked over to the old secretary desk in the corner. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of knitting patterns, was a wooden box. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were tubes of professional-grade oil paints, Winsor Newton, the expensive kind. I remembered the day she gave them to me. I was 18, packing for art school, terrified because my father had just cut off my allowance. Grandma had pressed the box into my hands, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman so frail. "They will try to starve you out, Danny," she had whispered, her eyes fierce. "They will try to make you think your hunger is a weakness. But it is not. It is fuel. I don't know if I can do it, Grandma," I had cried. "They say I am wasting my life. They are blind," she said, cupping my face. "They look at a forest and see lumber. You look at a forest and see magic. Don't let them extinguish your fire, sweetheart. One day, the world will see what I see." I touched the dried paint on the cap of a tube of cerulean blue. One day, that day felt very far away right now. I stood up and walked to the window. The moon was illuminating the large field behind the cottage. It was overgrown with wildflowers and weeds, a chaotic mess that my mother hated. But looking at it now, I remembered the conversation I had overheard last week at the grocery store. Two men in polo shirts had been talking in the checkout line. They were discussing the expansion of the Oak Creek Country Club. "We just need that one last parcel on the north edge," one man had said. "The funny little lot with the shack on it. Once we bulldoze that, we can put in the 16th and 17th holes. It will be the premier course in the state." That was the truth my parents hadn't put on their slideshow. They didn't want the cottage to pay off my debt. They wanted the land. The developers were likely offering millions for this strategic piece of property. And my parents, being the sharks they were, wanted to broker the deal. They wanted to take the only thing Grandma had kept from them and turn it into a fairway for their wealthy friends. The realization made my stomach churn. It wasn't just cruelty. It was greed. Cold, calculated greed. I turned away from the window and picked up my phone. The screen was cracked in the corner. A spiderweb of glass over the display. I opened my banking app. I needed to know how much time I had. I needed to know how long I could hold out against the siege that was coming. The number on the screen mocked me. Available balance. $342.16. I stared at it. $300. That was less than what my mother spent on a single facial. I had bills due next week. The property tax on the cottage was coming up in a month. And although the house was paid off, the taxes on the land were rising because of the gentrification creeping outward from the city. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in my chest. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was delusional. How could I fight a war against millionaires with $300? I was an illustrator. I lived gig to gig. My last paycheck had gone to fixing the furnace. "I can't do this, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "I am tired." I sat there in the dark for a long time, watching the battery percentage on my phone tick down. 10%, 9%. My life felt like it was draining away with it. Then, the phone buzzed. It was a soft vibration. But in the silence of the cottage, it sounded like a gunshot. I looked at the screen. It wasn't a text from my mother. It wasn't a threat from my father. It was an email notification. The sender's name was just 2 words. The Architect. I sat up straighter. I knew that name. Or rather, I knew the alias. Over the past 3 years, I had posted my work on every platform imaginable. ArtStation, Behance, obscure forums for digital concept art. Most people scrolled past. Some left a cool comment. But there was one user who always engaged, the Architect. He never commented publicly. He only sent private messages, asking detailed questions about my process, about the lore behind the characters I drew, about the way I rendered light. He had never commissioned me. He had just watched. My thumb hovered over the notification. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Why was he emailing me now? I opened the email. Subject Project Genesis. Exclusive proposal. Dear Danica, I have been watching your growth for 36 months. Your ability to build worlds is not just a talent. It is a rare architectural vision that is missing in the current digital landscape. I represent a private consortium currently developing a proprietary metaverse ecosystem. We are not building a game. We are building a digital civilization. We have the engineers, we have the infrastructure, and we have the capital. What we lack is a soul. We need a lead world designer. Someone to define the aesthetics, the physics of light, the flora, the fauna, and the atmosphere of this new reality. I do not want a team of corporate artists. I want you. Attached is a non-disclosure agreement. Upon signing, we are prepared to offer an initial retainer fee to secure your exclusivity for the next 6 months. Retainer amount, $500,000. Monthly salary, $250,000. Royalties, 5% of all asset sales in perpetuity. This is not a negotiation. This is an invitation to build the future. Regards, the Architect. I read the numbers again. $500,000, $250,000 a month. I thought I was hallucinating. I thought the stress of the evening had finally broken my brain. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of tap water, and drank it in one gulp. Then I went back to the phone. The email was still there. The attachment was real. I opened the PDF. It was a legitimate legal contract. The letterhead was embossed with a silver logo I didn't recognize, but the terms were clear. It was a lifeline thrown from the stratosphere. $500,000. That was more than the debt my parents had just humiliated me for. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life, and it was just the retainer. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, not with panic this time, but with something wilder. Hope, vindicated, terrifying hope. I looked at the unfinished painting on my easel. It was a landscape of a floating city, tethered to the ground by chains of gold. I had painted it feeling trapped. I looked back at the phone. If this was real, and my gut told me, with a strange, vibrating certainty, that it was, then everything had just changed. The balance of power had shifted, and my parents didn't even know it yet. I sat down at the dusty desk where my grandmother had hidden her paints. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing blue in the darkness. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. They wanted me to get a real job. They wanted me to stop doodling. I opened the reply window. Dear architect, where do I sign? I hit send. And as the message swooshed away into the digital ether, I felt the ghost of my grandmother standing behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder, laughing softly in the dark. The fire hadn't gone out. It had just turned into an inferno. The next 90 days did not feel like time passing. They felt like a fever breaking. I locked the door to the cottage and did not open it for anyone. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb, allowing only emergency alerts and emails from the architect to come through. I dragged my mattress into the living room, right next to my workstation, because walking to the bedroom felt like a commute I could not afford. For the first time in my life, I was not painting to please a teacher, a critic, or a parent. I was not painting to pay a heating bill. I was painting to build a universe. The architect had been right. His team had built the skeleton of a digital world, the physics engines, the server architecture, the collision detection. But it was a dead thing. It was gray boxes and flat planes. My job was to breathe. I worked 18 hours a day. I lived on instant coffee and adrenaline. My hands, usually stained with oil and charcoal, were now flying across a Wacom tablet, manipulating light and texture in a three-dimensional space. I designed forests where the trees were made of glass and the wind sounded like wind chimes. I created oceans of liquid mercury that reflected a sky with two violet suns. I designed the avatars, the creatures, the weather systems. It was a fugue state. There were moments, around 3 or 4 in the morning, where I would lose track of where my body ended and the screen began. I was the code. I was the color. The crushing weight of my parents' rejection, the humiliation of the party, the fear of poverty, all of it was channeled into the work. Every brushstroke was a scream. Every perfectly rendered shadow was a defiant act of existence. I stopped looking in the mirror. I stopped wondering if my father was angry or if my mother was gossiping about me. I didn't care. In the real world, I was Danica Prescott, the disappointment, but in here, in Project Genesis, I was a god. 3 months later, the launch day arrived. It was a Tuesday, just like the day I had been humiliated, but the feeling was entirely different. I sat in my darkened living room, the glow of 4 monitors illuminating my tired face. The architect had set up a global digital auction for the founding assets, the first generation of land, avatars, and unique items I had designed. The countdown timer on the screen hit 0. I expected a slow trickle. I expected maybe a few tech enthusiasts to bid a couple of $100. Instead, the numbers started spinning so fast they blurred. Item 001, the Obsidian Citadel, current bid. $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. Item 002, Avatar Series, The Weavers. Sold for $12,000 each within 3 seconds. I watched, mouth agape, as the total volume of sales climbed. 1 million, 2 million, 5 million. It was happening in real time, all over the world. People in Tokyo, London, Dubai, and New York were fighting over the things I had drawn in my pajamas while eating stale toast. By the time the auction closed 48 hours later, the total sales volume had shattered every projection the architect had made. The next morning, I received a notification from my bank. I opened the app, my finger hovering over the icon. I remembered the last time I had looked at this screen. Seeing $300 and feeling the cold grip of panic. I tapped the screen. Current balance, $3,125,450. I stared at it. I blinked, sure that my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. I refreshed the page. The number remained. $3 million. It wasn't just a number. It was armor. It was a fortress. It was the sound of my father's laughter at the party being silenced forever. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and down. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and sat on the floor under the spray for an hour. Sobbing, I cried until my chest hurt, releasing the tension of 10 years of struggle. I washed away the starving artist. I washed away the failure. When I stepped out and wrapped myself in a towel, I was someone else. 2 days later, I drove into the city. I didn't take my old sedan. I called a private car service. I had a meeting with Elias Vance. The architect had introduced us. "You need a shark," he had written in an email. "Elias is the biggest shark in the tank, but he only eats the bad guys." Elias's office was not in a glass skyscraper like my father's firm. It was in a restored historic building in the Arts District, behind an unmarked steel door. Inside, it looked more like a gallery than a law firm. Modern art hung on exposed brick walls, and the furniture was mid-century modern leather. Elias Vance was a man in his 50s, with silver hair tied back in a neat ponytail and glasses that probably cost more than my car. He wore a black turtleneck and a tailored suit jacket. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a curator. "Danica," he said, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was firm, dry, and reassuring. "It is an honor. I have been collecting digital art for a decade. Your work on the Genesis project is transcendent." "Thank you," I said. Sitting down, I felt out of place in my jeans and sweater. But Elias didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. "We have a lot of work to do," Elias said, sliding a tablet across the desk. $3 million is a lot of money, Danica. But in this country, new money is like fresh blood in the water, and given what you have told me about your family, the sharks are already circling, even if they don't know you are the target yet." "They don't know," I said. "They think I'm starving." "Good," Elias nodded. "Let's keep it that way. The first rule of wealth preservation is anonymity. If you buy a mansion tomorrow under the name Danica Prescott, your father will know by lunch. Your sister will be asking for a loan by dinner." "I don't want them to know," I said fiercely. "Not yet." "Then we disappear you," Elias said. He tapped the screen. "We are forming an LLC, Limited Liability Company. We will call it Aura Creatives. It will be the legal entity that owns your copyright, receives your royalties, and holds your assets. Your name will not appear on public records. I will serve as the registered agent." Aura Creatives. I tested the name. It sounded professional. It sounded distant. "Exactly," Elias said. "Now, your lifestyle? You need to upgrade, but you need to do it quietly. No flash, no red convertibles." He smiled, a sharp, knowing smile. He knew about the car my father had given Vanessa. I had told him everything during our preliminary encrypted call. "But first," Elias said, his expression turning serious, "we need to secure your base of operations, the cottage." "My parents want it," I said, the anxiety spiking in my chest. "They want to sell it to the golf course developers." "I know," Elias said. "I did some digging. The zoning commission is voting on the expansion next month. Your parents are counting on you defaulting on the property taxes or simply bullying you into signing that deed." "I won't sign." "You won't have to," Elias said, "because Danica Prescott isn't going to own the cottage anymore." I frowned. "What sell it," Elias said. Never. Sell it, he repeated. To Aura Creatives. He leaned forward. You sell the property to your own company. You pay fair market value using the money you just earned. The money goes from your right pocket to your left pocket, minus some taxes. But legally, the title transfers to a corporate entity. If your parents try to sue you for familial rights or try to claim you are incompetent, they will hit a stone wall. They can't bully a corporation, and since Aura Creatives is a private entity, they won't know you own it. I sat back, stunned. It was brilliant. It was cold, calculated, and absolutely brilliant. Do it, I said. We spent the next 4 hours signing papers. By the time I left his office, I was technically homeless. But Aura Creatives was the proud owner of a cottage in Oak Creek and held a bank account with a balance that made me dizzy. I returned to the cottage that evening feeling strange. The house looked the same, but it felt different. It was no longer a remnant of my grandmother's past. It was the headquarters of my future. I made a cup of tea and sat on the porch. For the first time in 3 months, I felt the urge to look at the world I had left behind. I downloaded Instagram again. I had deleted it the night of the party to stop the notifications. I logged into a burner account I used to follow art trends, no profile picture. No name. I typed in Vanessa_P_life. Her profile popped up instantly. It was a curated mosaic of a perfect life. Post 1, 3 days ago, Vanessa holding a champagne glass at a rooftop bar. Caption director, Life Views Success. Post 2. Last week. A photo of her in a stunning emerald green evening gown. Caption, Gala season is exhausting, but someone has to do it, Ethelgard Global Fashion. Post 3 yesterday, a selfie with mom and dad at a brunch. They were all smiling, but my father looked tired. His eyes were tight at the corners. Caption family first, always. I scrolled through the images, feeling a phantom ache in my chest. They looked so happy. They looked like they hadn't missed me for a second. But then, I zoomed in. I looked at the emerald gown in the second photo. It was gorgeous. But there, near the hem, was a tiny, almost invisible barcode tag. It was the kind of tag used by Lux Rent, a high-end clothing rental service. I knew because I had used them once for an art show years ago. Vanessa wasn't buying these clothes. She was renting them by the hour. I looked at the rooftop bar photo. I recognized the venue. It was the Skylark. I checked the geolocation. The date she posted it was a Tuesday. The Skylark was closed for private corporate events on Tuesdays. Ethelgard Global held their mandatory quarterly mixers there. She wasn't out celebrating. She was at a mandatory work function. And the brunch photo. I looked at the background. It wasn't the country club they usually frequented. It was a mid-range chain restaurant downtown, carefully cropped to hide the laminated menus. My heart skipped a beat. The cracks were there. They were hairline fractures, invisible to the naked eye, but to someone who had spent 3 months staring at pixels, they were gaping chasms. They were faking it. Vanessa wasn't living the high life. She was curating it. My father looked tired because the stress was eating him alive. They were projecting an image of wealth while the foundation was rotting away. I put the phone down. A strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't pity. It was the realization that the monsters under my bed were actually just people in masks, and the masks were slipping. I was about to go back inside when my phone buzzed in my hand. I froze. The screen lit up. The name flashing on the display was one I hadn't seen since the night I walked out of the mansion. Mom. It was a voice call, not a text, a call. The phone vibrated against my palm, insistent, demanding. I stared at it as if it were a bomb. For 3 months. Silence. And now, just as I had secured my fortress, just as I had seen through their lies, she was calling. Why now I didn't answer. I watched the screen until it went dark, then watched the notification for missed call appear. I sat there in the silence of my corporate-owned cottage, listening to the wind in the trees. The game had changed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the player with the winning hand. And they didn't even know we were sitting at the same table. I stood up and went back to my computer. I had work to do, and for the first time, I wasn't working to survive. I was working to win. The missed call from my mother sat on my phone screen like a crack in a windshield small, but promising a shattered view if I pressed too hard. I did not call her back. I did not listen to the voicemail. Instead, I called Elias Vance. "I need you to do something," I told him, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "My family is acting strange. They went from disowning me to desperate outreach in the span of 3 months. I need to know why." "You want a background check?" Elias asked. "No," I said, looking at the high-tech workstation I had built in my living room. "I want a due diligence report. Treat the Prescott family and their assets like a company we are planning to acquire. I want to see the balance sheets. I want to see the liabilities. If they are hiding rot in the floorboards, I want to see the termites." "Understood," Elias replied, the professional warmth in his voice replaced by the cold efficiency of a predator. "Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, I was back in his office. The air conditioning was humming, a low, expensive sound that buffered us from the noise of the city. Elias placed a thick binder on the mahogany desk between us. It was labeled simply, "Target Analysis Prescott/Ethelgard. "You might want to sit down for this, Danica," Elias said. He wasn't smiling. I sat. "Is it bad?" "It is catastrophic," Elias said. He opened the binder. "Let's start with your father, Robert Prescott, the pillar of the community, the real estate mogul." He slid a spreadsheet across the desk. It was a sea of red ink. "Your father is insolvent," Elias stated flatly. "Technically, he has been insolvent for 18 months. He leveraged the equity in the family mansion to buy into a commercial development project in the wetlands south of the city. It was a high-risk venture. He thought he could bribe the zoning board to let him build. He failed." I looked at the numbers. Debt $4,500,000. "The bank has already issued a notice of default," Elias continued. "He is paying the interest on his loans by taking out new loans from secondary lenders. It is a house of cards. Danica. If the wind blows, it falls." "He told everyone he was expanding," I whispered. "He told everyone business was booming." "He lied," Elias said. "But that is just standard corporate hubris. The real problem is your sister." I looked up. Vanessa Prescott." Elias read from a second document. "Director at Ethelgard Global." He paused, looking over his spectacles. "Except she is not a director." "I saw the promotion party," I argued. "I saw the invitation." "It was a fabrication," Elias said. "She is a senior public relations manager, a mid-level role. The director title was something she put on LinkedIn and told your parents. Ethelgard never gave her that title." "But the money," I said, confused. "The clothes, the trips, the car, even if she is renting the dresses. That lifestyle costs $10,000 a month. A PR manager doesn't make that." "No, she doesn't," Elias agreed. He turned the page. "But an embezzler does." The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. "Elias, what are you saying?" "Ethelgard Global is currently conducting an internal forensic audit," Elias explained, tapping a printed email. "My contacts in the city say they discovered irregularities in the marketing budget. It appears that Vanessa has been creating fake vendor accounts consulting firms that don't exist, graphic designers who never did any work, and approving invoices to pay them. The money flows into accounts controlled by her boyfriend, Kyle, and then back to her." I felt sick. I actually felt physical nausea rising in my throat. "How much?" "Roughly $500,000 over the last 2 years, Elias said. "They haven't gone to the police yet because they are still gathering evidence. They want to make sure the case is airtight before they arrest her. But the net is closing. Vanessa knows it. That is why she is panicking." The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with a deafening click. The party. The humiliation. The demand for the cottage. "They need the money to pay it back," I realized aloud. They don't want the cottage for the golf course to pay my debt. They need the golf course money to pay her debt back to the company before she gets indicted. Precisely. Elias nodded. If she can replace the missing funds before the audit concludes, she might be able to frame it as a bookkeeping error or negotiate a quiet resignation. If she can't, she's going to prison for 5 to 10 years. I sat back in the leather chair, staring at the ceiling. Get a real job. Like your sister, I murmured. Her real job is stealing. Your parents are desperate, Elias said. They are facing foreclosure on one front and a felony on the other. That is why they are calling you. You are the only asset they have left to liquidate. I thought about the voicemail on my phone, the "We miss you" message. It wasn't love. It was the sound of drowning people trying to climb on top of me to keep their heads above water. What do we do? I asked. We wait, Elias said. And while we wait, you move. Move. You are a wealthy woman now, Danica. Living in that cottage is dangerous. If they get desperate enough, they won't just call. They will show up. They might try to forge your signature. They might try to burn it down for insurance money. You need to be unreachable. He slid a brochure across the desk. It was for a building in the city center. A glass needle piercing the clouds. The Obsidian Tower. The penthouse is available, Elias said. It is fully furnished. Secure entry, 24-hour doorman, private elevator, and it is owned by a shell company, so your name won't be on the buzzer. I looked at the picture. It was sleek, cold, and beautiful. It was the opposite of the cottage. Buy it, I said. Use the Aura Creatives account. Moving into the penthouse was a surreal experience. I packed a single bag of clothes and my essential art supplies. I left the cottage exactly as it was, a museum of my past life, and drove into the city. The apartment was on the 45th floor. When I walked in, the entire city was spread out beneath me like a circuit board. I could see the traffic crawling on the highway, the lights of the harbor, and in the distance, the dark patch of green that was Oak Creek. It was silent up here, the kind of silence that cost millions. I set up my easel in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. For the next week, I watched my family disintegrate from 45 stories up. The calls from my mother became a daily ritual. I didn't answer, but I transcribed the voicemails. Day 1. Danica, please call me back. We are worried about you alone in that shack. The tone was condescending, maternal. Day 3. Danica, your father is not feeling well. His heart, you know how much stress he is under. Please, don't be stubborn. The guilt trip. Day 5. We just want to help you. Honey, we found a buyer who is willing to pay cash for the cottage, above market rate. We can set you up with a nice apartment. Just call us. The bribe. Day 7. Pick up the phone. You ungrateful little brat. We know you are there, the mask slipping. I saved every recording. Elias said they might be useful if we needed a restraining order later. I was feeling isolated in my tower. So on a rainy Thursday, I decided to venture out. I needed high-grade pigments that I couldn't order online. So I went to an art supply store in the historic district. I was browsing the oil paints, enjoying the smell of linseed and turpentine, when a voice made me freeze. Danica Prescott. I turned, standing there, shaking a wet umbrella. Was Mrs. Gable? She was one of my mother's oldest friends, a woman who treated gossip like a competitive sport. Mrs. Gable, I said, forcing a polite smile. Hello. Oh my heavens, look at you. She scanned my outfit. I was wearing a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, my new Stealth Wealth wardrobe. You look expensive. I have been doing well, I said vaguely. Well, that is a relief. She leaned in, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of sharing a scandal. Because your poor parents. Oh, it is just tragic. Tragic. I played dumb. I haven't spoken to them in a few months. I have been traveling. You don't know, Mrs. Gable gasped. clutching her pearls. Everyone is talking about it. The bank froze your father's construction accounts last week, and your sister, well, what about Vanessa? Mrs. Gable looked around to make sure no one was listening. My nephew works in risk management at Ethelgard. He says security escorted her out of the building on Friday. Suspended pending investigation. Can you imagine the shame? That sounds terrible, I said, keeping my face neutral. It gets worse, Mrs. Gable whispered, lowering her voice to a hiss. My husband was at the club last night. He saw your father meeting with certain types of people from the docks. You know, loan sharks. My blood ran cold. Are you sure? Oh, absolutely. Your father was sweating through his suit. He looked terrified. He was begging for an extension. He kept saying, "My daughter has a property. I just need a few more days to get her to sign." I felt the room spin slightly. He said that, I asked. He specifically mentioned the property. He said it was a done deal. Mrs. Gable nodded. He promised them he would have the deed by the end of the week. I gripped the tube of paint in my hand so hard the metal crinkled. My father hadn't just lied to me, he had sold me out. He had promised a property he didn't own to criminals who broke kneecaps for a living. He was gambling with my safety to cover his own failures. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice icy. I have to go. Give my love to your mother. She called after me. If you see her. I walked out of the store and into the rain. I didn't feel the cold. I felt a burning, white-hot rage. For years, they had told me I was the reckless one. They had told me I lived in a fantasy world. They had looked down on me from their tower of moral superiority. But the truth was, their tower was built on fraud, theft, and lies. My sister was a thief. My father was a con man dealing with the mob. And my mother was the enabler who orchestrated the whole twisted play. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the Obsidian Tower. As I watched the city blur past the window, I realized that the intervention at the party hadn't been an attempt to save me. It had been a recruitment drive. They wanted to drag me down into the mud with them because they knew, deep down, that they were sinking. I pulled out my phone. There was a new voicemail from my sister. I pressed play. Danny! Vanessa's voice was cracked, high-pitched, hysterical. You need to call me. Please, it is a matter of life and death. Mom says you are being difficult, but you don't understand. There are people. There are bad people involved. Just sign the papers. Why do you have to be so selfish? Selfish. I laughed. It was a dark, dangerous sound. You want to see selfish. Vanessa. I whispered to the phone. Just wait. I texted Elias. They are moving to phase 2. Dad is borrowing from sharks. Vanessa is suspended. Proceed with the acquisition. Elias replied instantly. Acquisition of what? Everything. I typed back. I want to buy their debt. If my father was going to sell his soul to the devil, he was going to be surprised when he found out the devil was his own daughter, and I wasn't interested in his soul. I was interested in his collateral. The knock on the cottage door came at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. It was not the polite rap of a delivery driver or the hesitant knock of a neighbor. It was a rhythmic, proprietary pounding, the sound of someone who believed they owned the wood their knuckles were striking. I was in the middle of rendering a texture map for a subterranean crystal cave, but I knew instantly who it was. I had spent the last week living in the penthouse at the Obsidian Tower. But I still came back to the cottage during the day to work. The light here was better, or perhaps I just needed the grounding presence of my grandmother's ghost to keep my ego in check now that my bank account was swollen with 7 figures. I checked the security feed on my tablet. There they were, the unholy trinity, my father, Robert, wearing a beige trench coat that looked slightly too large for him now, as if he had shrunk inside it, my mother, Sylvia, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity, and Vanessa, standing a few feet behind them, looking at her phone. Her posture slumped in a way that screamed defeat. I took a deep breath. Elias had warned me they would come. He had told me to be unreachable. But a part of me, the part that was now a ruthless businesswoman, wanted this meeting. I needed to look them in the eye. I needed to gauge the desperation level for myself. I opened the door. "Holly!" my mother cried out before the door was even fully open. She surged forward, wrapping me in a hug that smelled of Chanel No. 5 and desperation. Oh, thank God. We were so worried. I stood stiffly in her embrace, my arms at my sides. "Hello, Mother." "We have been calling and calling," she pulled back, her eyes glistening with tears that I might have believed 10 years ago. "Why didn't you answer? We thought something terrible had happened." "I have been busy," I said, stepping back to create distance. My father stepped over the threshold without asking. He looked around the small living room, his eyes scanning for what signs of squalor, evidence of my failure. He seemed disappointed to find the room clean, warm, and smelling of fresh coffee. "We were too hard on you," Robert said abruptly. His voice was rough, gravelly. "At the party, we let our emotions get the best of us." "You tore up my childhood photos," I reminded him. "You presented me with a bill for my existence. It was tough love." "Danica," he said, spreading his hands, "we just want you to succeed. Parents have to push their children sometimes. Maybe we pushed too hard, but it came from a place of love. Gaslighting. It was an art form in the Prescott family, passed down like a genetic trait. They were trying to rewrite history while the ink was still wet." "What do you want?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "We want to make it right." Vanessa spoke up from the doorway. Her voice was thin, lacking its usual arrogant lilt. She looked pale, her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the dark circles under her eyes. "We want to be a family again." "Dinner," my mother announced, clasping her hands together. "Tonight, at Le Jardin. Just the four of us. No business, no shouting, just a nice meal to hit the reset button." Le Jardin was the most expensive restaurant in the city. It was where my father took clients he needed to impress. It was a power move disguised as an olive branch. "I don't think that is a good idea," I said. "Please, Danica," my father said. For the first time, I looked him in the eye and saw the terror. It was buried deep, behind the bluster and the ego. But it was there. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, feeling the ground crumble beneath his heels. "Just one dinner. If you still hate us afterward, we will leave you alone." I looked at Vanessa. She was chewing on her thumbnail, a habit she hadn't had since she was 12. "Fine," I said. 7 o'clock. I did not go to dinner unprepared. At 6:30, a black sedan pulled up to the cottage. The driver was a man named Marcus, a former military contractor whom Elias had hired for me. He was built like a vending machine and wore a suit that struggled to contain his shoulders. "You are my Uber driver for the night," I told him as I climbed into the back seat. "But if I text you the word check, you come inside and you don't ask questions." "Understood. Ms. Prescott," Marcus rumbled. I adjusted the collar of my silk blouse. Underneath the fabric, taped securely to my sternum, was a digital voice recorder. Elias had insisted, if they try to coerce you, get it on tape. If they try to commit fraud, get it on tape. When I arrived at Le Jardin, they were already seated at a corner booth, secluded from the rest of the dining room by a trellis of ivy. A bottle of vintage Cabernet was already open on the table, and it looked like my father was working on his second glass. "You made it," Sylvia chirped, waving me over. I sat down next to Vanessa. She smelled of mints and anxiety. "You look different," Vanessa said, eyeing my clothes. She was trying to appraise the cost of my outfit, but I was wearing bespoke minimalist pieces with no logos. It confused her. "I am doing well," I said simply. The waiter arrived, and we ordered. Small talk ensued, painful, jagged small talk about the weather, about neighbors I didn't care about the traffic. My mother kept reaching across the table to pat my hand. Every touch felt like a branding iron. By the time the appetizers arrived, my father had finished the bottle of wine and ordered another. His cheeks were flushed. "So," he began, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. "We have been thinking about your future. Danica, here it comes." "My future is fine, Dad," I said, picking at my escargot. "Is it?" He chuckled darkly. "Living in that shack, painting pictures for the internet." "That is not a future, honey. That is a hobby." "Robert," my mother warned softly. "No, she needs to hear this," he insisted. "Danica, we are willing to offer you a lifeline, a real one this time." He reached into his briefcase, which he had kept under the table, and pulled out a folder. "We know you are struggling," he said. "We know you barely have 2 nickels to rub together. So, the family has decided to absorb your burden." "Absorb my burden," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "The cottage," Vanessa said. She didn't look at me. She was staring at her wine glass. "It is a money pit. The taxes, the maintenance. You can't afford it. So here's the plan." My father opened the folder. "You sign the deed over to us. We sell the land to the developers. We use that money to clear up some temporary liquidity issues the family is facing." "And what do I get?" I asked. "You get a job," my father said, as if he were handing me the keys to the kingdom. I spoke to my office manager. "We have an opening at the front desk. Receptionist. It pays $18 an hour. Full benefits after 90 days. I stared at him. I had made $3 million in the last 3 months. I was currently making $250,000 a month from my contract with the architect, and my father was offering me $18 an hour to answer his phones. The insult was so magnificent, so comprehensive, that I almost laughed. "A receptionist," I said. "It is a good start." My mother nodded encouragingly. "You could work your way up. Maybe in a few years, you could help with the filing. And," my father added, sliding a document across the table, "to make sure everything is legal. We have drawn up this loan agreement." I looked at the paper. It was a masterpiece of creative fiction. It was a promissory note. It stated that I, Danica Prescott, was borrowing $500,000 from Robert and Sylvia Prescott, and as collateral for this loan, I was pledging the cottage. "I don't understand," I said, feigning confusion. "You are not giving me $500,000. You are taking my house." "It is for tax purposes," Vanessa said quickly. "It simplifies the transfer. We lend you the money on paper. You default on the loan immediately. We take the house as collateral. It saves us from paying capital gains tax on a direct gift. And look at the interest rate." I pointed to the fine print. 15%. Standard private lending rate. My father waved his hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter. Danica, you are never going to pay it back. That is the point. It is just a vehicle to get the property into our name so we can sell it and save the family." "Save the family?" I repeated. I leaned back, swirling the water in my glass. "Why does the family need saving, Dad?" "Business is booming, isn't it? Vanessa is a director at Ethelgard. You are rich." The table went silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. "We have some cash flow interruptions," my father muttered. "The market is volatile." "It is just a bridge," Sylvia added, her voice trembling. "Just until next quarter." "It is funny," I said, looking directly at Vanessa, "because I heard Ethelgard Global is having a great year. Their stock is up 20%. Vanessa flinched. She picked up her wine glass, her hand shaking so badly the red liquid sloshed against the sides. "You don't know anything about finance, Danica," Vanessa snapped. Her voice was brittle. "Just sign the paper. Stop trying to understand things that are above your head. Let the adults handle the money." "The adults," I nodded. "Right." I reached into my purse, not to get a pen, but to touch the cool metal of the voice recorder, ensuring the red light was still on. "I am curious, though," I said, locking eyes with my sister. "If you are so successful, Vanessa, why do you need my little shack? Why doesn't the director just write a check to help Daddy out?" "I told you," she hissed. "My assets are tied up." "Tied up in what?" I asked. Fake vendor accounts. Vanessa froze. It was as if I had reached across the table and slapped her. Her eyes went wide, filled with a sudden, animalistic panic. "What did you say?" she whispered. My father dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "I asked," I said, enunciating every syllable clearly. "How much Ethelgard Global pays you? Vanessa, is it enough to cover the $500,000 they found missing during the audit?" Vanessa jerked back. Her elbow hit her wineglass. The goblet tipped over, sending a dark red stain spreading across the pristine white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. She stammered. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Who told you that?" my father demanded, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Who have you been talking to?" "It doesn't matter who I talk to," I said calmly. "What matters is that you brought me here, to this ridiculous restaurant, to trick me. You wanted me to sign a fraudulent loan agreement so you could launder my inheritance to pay off her embezzlement." "Don't you use that word," my mother shrieked, drawing stares from the nearby tables. "She made a mistake. An accounting error. She is your sister." "She is a criminal," I said. "And so are you. Dad, I know about the loan sharks. I know about the guys from the docks you owe money to." My father stood up. He loomed over me, his fists clenched on the table. For a second, I thought he might hit me. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little—" he started. I didn't flinch. I just tapped my phone screen. Check. 2 seconds later, a shadow fell over the table. Marcus was there. He didn't say anything. He just stood behind my father, crossing his massive arms. The threat was implicit and overwhelming. My father looked at Marcus, then back at me, and slowly sank back into his chair. "You are selfish," my mother sobbed, burying her face in her napkin. "We gave you everything, and now, when we need you, when your sister's life is on the line, you turn your back on us." "I am not turning my back," I said, standing up. "I am setting a boundary. There is a difference." "If I go to jail," Vanessa whispered, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks, "it will be your fault. You could have saved me." "No, Vanessa," I said, looking down at her. "You spent 10 years pretending to be better than me. You spent 10 years mocking my work, my life, my choices. You wanted a real job? Well, actions have real consequences. That is as real as it gets." I picked up the loan agreement from the table. My father reached for it, but I pulled it away. "I will be keeping this," I said. "My lawyer might find it interesting." "You can't leave," my father sputtered. "We haven't—" "The bill." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I tossed it onto the red-stained tablecloth. "I paid the bill when I arrived," I said, "including the wine you spilled." I looked at them one last time. The once great Prescott family, reduced to 3 terrified grifters in a booth, drowning in their own lies. "Consider it charity," I said. "Don't contact me again." I turned and walked away. Marcus fell in step behind me, a silent guardian. I could feel their eyes boring into my back, but I didn't turn around. I walked out of Le Jardin and into the cool night air, taking the deepest breath of my life. I had the recording, I had the fraudulent contract, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that for the first time in history, the Prescotts were afraid of Danica. The collapse of the Prescott dynasty did not happen in slow motion. It happened with the violent, terrifying speed of a car crash. 14 days after I walked out of Le Jardin, leaving my family drowning in their own spilled wine and lies. The hammer finally fell. I was sitting in my penthouse at the Obsidian Tower, drinking green tea and reviewing the physics engine for a new water simulation in Project Genesis. When the notification popped up on my newsfeed, it was a headline from the Oak Creek Gazette. "Local executive charged in $500,000 embezzlement scheme." I clicked the link. There was no mugshot yet, just a stock photo of the Ethelgard Global headquarters and a smaller, pixelated image of Vanessa taken from her LinkedIn profile. The article was brutal in its brevity. It stated that Vanessa Prescott, formerly a senior public relations manager, had been terminated for cause and was facing civil and criminal charges for the misappropriation of company funds, totaling $542,000. The article mentioned that she had allegedly created a network of shell companies to bill for non-existent marketing services. It mentioned that the district attorney was involved. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. It was real. The threat wasn't just a bargaining chip anymore. My sister, the golden child, the one who was supposed to have the real job, was now a headline. The fallout was immediate and nuclear, according to Elias, who had his ear to the ground. The social fabric of Oak Creek ripped apart within hours. The country club revoked my father's membership, citing a violation of their code of conduct regarding financial impropriety. The neighbors, the same people who had sipped champagne at Vanessa's party 2 weeks ago, suddenly developed amnesia. They didn't know the Prescotts. They had never really liked the Prescotts, but social ostracization was the least of their problems. The sharks smelled blood. The bank called in my father's commercial loans. When he couldn't pay, they initiated foreclosure proceedings on the family mansion, and the other lenders, the ones Mrs. Gable had whispered about, the men from the docks with no names and short tempers, they didn't send letters. They sent heavy men in dark cars to sit at the end of the driveway. Watching the house, my parents were trapped. They were sitting in a multi-million-dollar house that they no longer owned, waiting for the police to come for their daughter and the mob to come for their niece. They tried to sell the cottage. Elias told me they had attempted to file a deed transfer 3 days ago, likely forging my signature. But the clerk at the county recorder's office had flagged it immediately. The property no longer belonged to Danica Prescott. It belonged to Aura Creatives, a corporate entity with ironclad legal protections. Their attempt to sell it was just another felony to add to the pile. I thought they would call. I thought they would scream into my voicemail again. But silence is often the prelude to an ambush. It was 2:00 in the afternoon on a Friday. The sky outside my floor-to-ceiling windows was a bruised purple, threatening a storm. The intercom on my desk buzzed, a sharp sound that cut through the ambient music I was playing. I pressed the button. Yes. Ms. Prescott. The doorman's voice was polite but hesitant. There are 3 people here to see you, a Mr. and Mrs. Prescott, and a younger woman. They say they are your family. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. I didn't give them this address, I said. They claim they hired a private investigator, ma'am, the doorman said. They are causing a bit of a scene in the lobby. Should I call the police? I hesitated. I could send them away. I could have them arrested for trespassing. It would be easy. It would be safe, but it wouldn't be finished. If I sent them away now, they would keep hunting me. They would camp outside the building. They would create a spectacle, and deep down, a part of me, the part that had been humiliated in front of 200 people, wanted them to see. I wanted them to see the tower I had built while they were busy tearing me down. No, I said, my voice steady. Send them up. I stood and walked to the center of the living room. The penthouse was a sprawling 3,000 square feet of minimalist luxury. The floors were polished concrete. The furniture was Italian leather. On the walls hung massive digital displays showcasing my art in 4K resolution, the very art they had called doodling. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. They stepped out, and for a moment, I didn't recognize them. My father, Robert, looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his face gray with stubble. My mother, Sylvia, was wearing a tracksuit, something I had never seen her wear in public, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were red-rimmed and darting around the room like a trapped animal. And Vanessa. She looked small. The arrogance was gone, scraped away by the terror of impending prison. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie, her hands shoved deep into her pockets. She couldn't meet my eyes. They froze in the entryway. My father looked at the view of the city skyline. He looked at the massive abstract painting on the far wall. He looked at the wet bar stocked with top-shelf liquor. What is this? My father rasped. His voice echoed in the large space. "Welcome to my home," I said. My mother took a step forward, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Your home, Danica. This is a penthouse. This building. The doorman said the rent here is $10,000 a month." "18,000, I corrected her gently. "But I don't rent. I own it." "You own it," my father repeated. He laughed, a short, hysterical sound. "Don't lie to us. Danica, we know you. We know what you are." He walked further into the room, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the space, looking for the explanation that fit his worldview. "Who is he?" my father demanded, turning to face me. "Who is the man? Is he old? Is he married? Is that how you are paying for this? You found some rich old fool to take pity on you." "Robert," my mother gasped. But she looked at me with the same suspicion. "Danica, please tell me you didn't compromise yourself. Is that the only way you think a woman can make money?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen island. "By selling herself?" "Well, you certainly didn't buy this with your cartoons," Vanessa snapped. Her voice was weak, but the bitterness was still there. "You were begging for gas money 6 months ago. Things change," I said. "Stop playing games," my father shouted. The desperation broke through his confusion. "We don't have time for your fantasies. We know you don't have this kind of money. You are squatting here, or you are keeping this place for someone else, but we need help. Danica, real help." He pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket. "The bank gave us 48 hours to vacate the house," he said, his hands shaking. 48 hours. And your sister, the lawyers say she needs a retainer of $50,000 just to start negotiations. We need cash. We know you don't have it. But maybe this man you are seeing—" "There is no man. Dad," I cut him off. "Don't lie." "There is no man," I repeated, my voice rising. "There is no sugar daddy. There is no lottery ticket. There is just me." I walked over to my desk and picked up a tablet. I unlocked it and brought up the dashboard for Aura Creatives. "You wanted me to get a real job," I said, walking toward them. "You told everyone I was wasting my life. You laughed at my art." I turned the tablet around and shoved it into my father's hands. "Look at it." He stared at the screen. It was a live dashboard of my monthly earnings, broken down by royalties, contract fees from Project Genesis, and asset sales. "What is this?" He squinted. "Aura Creatives." "What is that?" "That is me," I said. "That is my company. I am the sole owner. I am the lead world designer for the largest metaverse project in history. The art you laughed at. It is currently the most valuable digital real estate in the world." My father's eyes scanned the numbers. I watched his face go pale. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. 3? He stammered. 3 million. "That was last month," I said. "This month is projected to be 3.5 million. $3 million, my mother shrieked. She rushed to his side, grabbing his arm to look at the screen. "That is not possible. That is a typo. $3 million a year. A month," I said. $3 million a month, give or take a few $100,000. The silence that descended on the room was heavier than the one at the party. It was absolute. It was the sound of a worldview shattering into dust. Vanessa looked up. Her eyes were wide, glassy, and filled with a shock so profound she looked like she might faint. "You," she whispered. "You are making $3 million a month, you." "I am," I said. "And I bought the cottage from myself 2 months ago to protect it from you. That is why the sale failed. You were trying to sell property that belongs to a multi-million-dollar corporation." My father slowly lowered the tablet. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in his life. But he didn't see his daughter. He didn't see the artist he had tormented. He saw a bank vault. I watched the transformation happen in real time. The contempt, the anger, the disappointment, it all evaporated. In its place, a new expression formed. It was a look of hungry, desperate, fawning adoration. It was the look a starving wolf gives a piece of meat. "Danica," my father breathed. His voice changed. It became soft, oily. "My God, you did it. You actually did it." "I always knew," my mother said. She stepped away from him and toward me, her hands reaching out. "I always told everyone, didn't I? Robert, I said Danica has a special gift. I said she is a genius." "You called my work garbage 2 weeks ago," I said, stepping back out of her reach. "You read a bill for my dental work in front of 200 people. Oh, honey, that was just motivation." My mother laughed nervously. "We were trying to spark a fire in you, and look, it worked. You are a success. You are the most successful Prescott in history." "We are so proud of you," my father said. Stepping forward, he looked at the luxury apartment with new eyes, calculating the value of everything he saw. So incredibly proud. Vanessa didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her face twisting with a mixture of jealousy and sudden, calculating hope. "So," my father rubbed his hands together, "this changes everything, doesn't it?" "Does it?" I asked. "Of course." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. "You have the resources. You have the power. You can fix this. You can make all of this go away." He gestured to his wrinkled suit, to Vanessa, to the invisible weight of the debts crushing them. "You can pay off the bank," he said, the words tumbling out faster now. "You can pay back Ethelgard. We can hush this whole thing up. We can say it was a misunderstanding. With your money, we can hire the best lawyers. We can save the family name." $3 million a month, my mother murmured, looking at me as if I were a golden idol. "We could buy a new house, a bigger one. We could start over." "Danica," Vanessa said, stepping forward. Her voice was trembling. "Please, I don't want to go to jail. You have enough. You have so much. You wouldn't even miss it." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had tried to break me, the people who had valued me at zero until the moment they saw a dollar sign attached to my name. They didn't love me. They didn't respect me. They just wanted to consume me. They were parasites, and they had just realized they were standing on the biggest host they had ever seen. "You are right," I said softly. "I could fix everything. I could write a check right now for $500,000 and not even notice it was gone from my account." Hope flared in their eyes like a match in a dark room. My father took a step closer, his hand reaching for his pocket, probably to find a pen. "But," I continued, my voice hardening into steel, "why would I do that?" "Because we are family," my mother cried. "Family," I laughed. "You disowned me when I was poor. You tried to steal my home when you were desperate. And now that I am rich, suddenly, I am your daughter again." "Danica, please," my father begged. "Don't be vindictive. This is life or death." "You told me to get a real job," I said. "I did. And in my line of work, we don't invest in failing assets. And you three?" I looked at them with cold, final judgment. "You are a terrible investment." My father's face went slack. The hunger turned back into fear. But this time, it was a deeper, darker fear. It was the fear of a man who sees the lifeboat sailing away and realizes the captain is the person he threw overboard. "You can't mean that," he whispered. "Get out of my house," I said. "Danica," my mother wailed. "Get out," I repeated, "before I call security. And trust me, looking at you three, they won't hesitate to throw you out on the curb." I walked to the door and held it open. They stood there for a moment, paralyzed by the sudden reversal of fortune. Then, slowly, brokenly, they started to move. But as they passed me, I saw the look in my father's eyes. It wasn't defeat. It was scheming. He wasn't going to give up. He had seen the money, and a man like Robert Prescott would burn down the world to get his hands on it. I closed the door behind them and locked it. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I walked back to the window and looked down at the city. They thought the game was over. They thought they could guilt me into saving them, but they didn't know the truth. I wasn't just refusing to help them, I was about to buy them. The heavy oak door to my penthouse did not close, just as the latch was about to click shut, sealing my sanctuary against the toxicity of my past. A hand jammed into the gap. It was my father's hand. The skin was gray and shaking, but the grip was desperate, fueled by the adrenaline of a man who had just seen a mountain of gold after wandering in the desert for 40 years. He pushed the door open, not with violence this time, but with a pathetic, wheedling urgency. The transformation I had witnessed beginning moments ago was now complete. The sneer was gone. The condescension that had defined his face for 3 decades had vanished, replaced by a wide, trembling smile that looked like a rictus of terror and greed. "Danica, wait," he breathed, stepping back into my foyer uninvited. "We didn't mean it. We were upset. We were not thinking clearly." My mother followed him, her hands clasped together in a prayer-like gesture. "We were just shocked. Honey, that is all. It is a lot to take in. Our little girl. A tycoon, a visionary." She reached out and stroked the sleeve of my cashmere sweater, her touch light and reverent, as if I were a religious icon she was afraid to tarnish. "I always told your father," she lied, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "I said, Robert, she sees the world differently. She is a genius." "Didn't I say that?" "She did." My father nodded vigorously, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We were hard on you because we wanted you to reach this potential. It was a strategy. And look, it worked. You are magnificent." I walked back to the center of the living room and sat in my Italian leather armchair. It was a piece of furniture that cost more than the car I drove in college. I crossed my legs and rested my chin on my hand, watching them perform. It was fascinating, in a clinical, dissecting sort of way. I felt like a scientist watching bacteria react to a new stimulus. The stimulus was money, and the reaction was a complete abandonment of dignity. Vanessa was the last to re-enter. She didn't share their manic energy. She looked like a ghost. She walked over to the expensive sectional sofa and collapsed onto it, burying her face in her hands. "So," I said, my voice flat, "I am a genius now. 10 minutes ago, I was a disappointment who needed to work as a receptionist." "Water under the bridge," my father waved his hand dismissively. He paced around the room, his eyes darting to the expensive art, the view, the sheer capital that surrounded him. "We are family, Danica. Families fight, but in the end, we stick together, especially when there is a crisis." He stopped in front of me, composing himself. He buttoned his jacket, trying to summon the ghost of the powerful businessman he used to be. "We need to talk numbers," he said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The situation is critical. You know that. But with your resources, it is a simple fix." "Is it?" I asked. $2 million, he said. He said the number quickly, as if saying it fast made the amount smaller. $2 million, I repeated. "That is the price of your love today." "It is not a price," my mother gasped. "It is a bridge loan, a family loan." "Break it down for me," I said, leaning back. "Justify the investment." My father licked his lips. $550,000 to Ethelgard Global to cover the discrepancy. That keeps Vanessa out of prison. It stops the criminal charges. He glanced at Vanessa. She didn't look up, but her shoulders were shaking. $1 million to pay off the commercial loans on the wetlands project, he continued. That stops the bank from foreclosing on the house. And the rest, $450,000, to settle some private debts, the kind that don't have paperwork, the loan sharks, the men watching the house. So, $2 million, I summarized. And what are the terms of this loan? Terms. My father blinked, looking confused. Well, it is family, no interest, obviously, and we will pay you back. when the market turns, when the golf course deal goes through, when things stabilize. So, never, I said. You want a $2 million gift. It is not a gift, he insisted, a flash of his old irritation appearing before he tamped it down. It is an investment in the family legacy if we lose the house. If Vanessa goes to jail, the Prescott name is ruined. Your name, Danica. Do you want to be associated with a scandal? I changed my name legally when I formed the company, I lied smoothly. My public persona is clean. Your scandal is your own. Vanessa made a sound, then a choked, wet sob. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her makeup streaked down her cheeks in jagged lines. Please, Danny, she whispered. I can't go to jail. You don't know what it is like. I am terrified. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Why did you do it? Vanessa, I asked. I wasn't mocking her. I genuinely wanted to know. You had a good job. You had a salary. Why steal? Because it wasn't enough, she cried out, her voice cracking. It was never enough. Dad kept pressuring me to get the promotion. Mom wanted me to join the country club committee. I had to look the part. I had to drive the right car. I had to wear the right clothes. I maxed out my credit cards 3 years ago. I was drowning, and no one noticed because I was smiling. She pointed a shaking finger at our father. He told me to do whatever it took to win. She sobbed. He said winners make their own rules. So I did. I made my own rules. And now you are facing 10 years in a federal penitentiary, I finished for her. You can save me, she begged, sliding off the sofa to her knees. It was a pathetic sight, the golden child, kneeling on my polished concrete floor. You have $3 million a month coming in. $2 million is nothing to you. It is less than a month of work. Please, I am your sister. I looked at her. I looked at my parents, who were nodding encouragingly, as if Vanessa's degradation was just part of the negotiation process. I thought about the party. I thought about the moment my mother ripped the photo of me and Grandma Eleanor. I thought about the laughter of 200 strangers. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for a bailout. They wanted to use my success, the success they had tried to strangle in the crib, to erase the consequences of their own greed. You are right, I said. The room went silent. I have the money. I could write a check right now, and this nightmare would be over for you. My mother let out a breath she had been holding. Oh, thank God. I knew it. I knew you had a good heart. However, I said, raising a finger, I am not a charity, and I am not a bank. My father's smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean I don't lend money to high-risk borrowers with a history of poor financial management, I said coldly. That is bad business, and I'm a very good businesswoman. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. The rain had started to fall, streaking the glass like tears. I will not give you $2 million, I said, my back to them. But you just said, my father started, panic rising in his voice. I said I have the money. I didn't say I would give it to you. I turned around to face them. Here is my counteroffer. I walked back to the desk and picked up a notepad. I acted as if I were sketching a rough draft, but the plan was already crystalline in my mind. Elias and I had discussed this contingency. I will not give you a cent, I said. Instead, I will contact your creditors directly. I will contact the bank holding the mortgage on the mansion. I will contact Ethelgard Global, and I will contact the private lenders you owe money to. You will pay them, my mother asked, hopeful but confused. I will buy your debt, I corrected her. My father went still. He understood. He was a real estate man, after all. He knew exactly what that meant. No, he whispered. Yes, I said. I will pay Ethelgard the $550,000. In exchange, they will sign over the civil claim against Vanessa to me. I will pay the bank the outstanding balance on your commercial loans, purchasing the note at a discount since it is distressed, and I will pay your friends at the docks, I took a step closer to him. Do you understand what that means, Dad? He didn't answer. His face was the color of old ash. It means you won't owe the bank anymore, I said. You won't owe the company, and you won't owe the mob. You will owe me. You can't do that, he stammered. That is hostile. It is business, I said, echoing the words he had said to me 1,000 times. I will become the sole holder of all your debts, the mortgage on the house, the restitution for Vanessa's crimes, everything. And then what? Vanessa asked, her voice trembling. Do we just owe you? Yes, I said. But unlike a family loan, this will be a formal legal arrangement. We will draw up a payment plan. You will pay me back every single cent, with interest. If you miss a payment, I will do exactly what the bank would do. I looked at my father. I will foreclose on the house. I will seize your assets. And regarding Vanessa, I looked at my sister. If I own the civil claim from Ethelgard, I can choose whether or not to press for wage garnishment. I can control your financial future for the next 20 years. You are a monster, my mother whispered. She looked at me with horror, as if I had grown horns. How can you do this to your own flesh and blood? You are setting yourself up to be our master. I am setting myself up to be your creditor, I corrected. It is a very standard relationship. You wanted a real-world solution. This is it. I won't sign it, my father shouted. The anger returned, sudden and explosive. He slammed his hand on the back of the leather chair. I will not be a slave to my own daughter. I will not let you dangle this over my head. You ungrateful, spiteful little... Ungrateful, I interrupted him, my voice cutting through his shouting like a scalpel. That is an interesting word. Dad. I walked right up to him. I was shorter than him, but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. Do you remember the party? I asked softly. Do you remember the bill you presented to me, $418,000.52? He flinched. You itemized my existence, I said. You charged me for my braces. You charged me for my food. You charged me for the roof over my head. You treated parenting like a transaction. You taught me that in this family. Love has a price tag. I spread my arms, gesturing to the penthouse, to the empire I had built. Well, I learned my lesson, I said. I am just following the example you set. You billed me for raising me. Now I am billing you for saving you. That was different, he sputtered. We were trying to teach you responsibility. And I'm teaching you accountability, I countered. Take the deal, Robert, or walk out that door and deal with the police and the loan sharks on your own. Those are your choices. Option A. You answer to me. Option B, you lose everything. My father looked at the door. He looked at Vanessa, sobbing on the floor. He looked at my mother, who was weeping into her hands. He knew he had no choice. The loan sharks wouldn't offer a payment plan. The bank wouldn't hesitate to take the house, and Ethelgard was days away from filing charges. I was the only shark in the water that wasn't going to eat them alive immediately. I was just going to put them in a cage. Why? He asked, his voice broken. Why can't you just give it to us? Why do you have to humiliate us? Because dignity is expensive. Dad, I said, returning to my desk and sitting down. And you are currently bankrupt. I pulled a fresh contract from my drawer, a standard debt acquisition form Elias had drafted for me days ago, anticipating this exact moment. I will call my lawyer, I said. He will draft the specific terms by morning. Go home, wait for the call, and Dad. He looked up, his eyes hollow. Don't try to sell the furniture, I said. It is part of the collateral now. I watched them leave. They didn't walk out with the same arrogance they had walked in with. They shuffled. They looked smaller, heavier. They looked like people who had just sold their souls and realized the price was much lower than they expected. When the door clicked shut, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. It was the feeling of balancing an equation. The debt they had hung over my head for 32 years had just been transferred. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias. "It is done," I said. "Prepare the paperwork. We are buying the debt." "All of it?" Elias asked. "Every penny," I said. "I want to own the roof over their heads and the ground under their feet." "Understood," Elias said. "You know they will hate you for this. They already hate me." "Elias," I said, looking at the reflection of my own eyes in the dark window. "Now, they just have to pay for the privilege." I assumed that when I offered to buy my family's debt. I had cornered them. I assumed that a drowning man does not slap away the hand of the lifeguard, even if he hates the lifeguard's guts. I was wrong. I had underestimated the depth of Robert Prescott's pride and the sheer, venomous creativity of a narcissist who feels he has been wronged. 3 days after our meeting in the penthouse, I was expecting a signed contract. Instead, I received a process server. He was a young man in a cheap suit who caught me in the lobby of the Obsidian Tower. He handed me a thick envelope with an apologetic grimace. Inside was a civil summons. My parents were suing me. I took the elevator up to my penthouse, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I called Elias immediately. "Filial responsibility laws," Elias said, his voice crackling with professional disdain over the speakerphone. "It is an archaic statute in the state code. It was designed to prevent elderly people from becoming a burden on the state if their children have the means to support them. It is rarely enforced, but technically, it exists." "They are claiming they are destitute," I asked, pacing the length of my living room. "They are claiming they are destitute because they spent their life savings supporting your failed art career," Elias corrected. "They are rewriting history. They are alleging that you drained their retirement accounts, and now, in their hour of need, you are abandoning them." I walked to the window. Down below, a news van was already parking across the street. "They went to the press," I said. "Of course they did." Elias sighed. "They hired Marcus Sterling. He is a billboard lawyer. He likes cameras more than he likes the law. They must have borrowed money from somewhere else to pay his retainer." For the next week, I lived in a fishbowl. The headlines were vicious. My parents played their roles perfectly. They went on morning talk shows, weeping about their ungrateful daughter. My mother wore threadbare clothes she had probably bought at a thrift store, specifically for the interview. My father looked frail and confused, playing the part of the devoted patriarch betrayed by the child he sacrificed everything for. Tech tycoon abandons ailing parents. The metaverse millionaire who won't buy her mom a loaf of bread. Public opinion was split. The internet hated the rich. And to them, I was just another crypto villain hoarding wealth while my poor family starved. I received hate mail. I received death threats. But I stayed silent. I didn't give interviews. I didn't tweet. "Let them talk," Elias told me. "Let them build their tower of lies as high as they want. The higher they build it, the harder it falls when we pull the foundation out." The court date arrived on a gray, drizzly Tuesday. It wasn't a criminal trial, but because of the high profile and the amount of money involved, they were suing me for monthly support payments of $50,000 plus punitive damages. It was being heard by a superior court judge. Judge Beatrice Holloway was a woman known for her impatience with frivolity. She sat on the bench with a face like carved granite. I sat at the defendant's table with Elias. Across the aisle, my parents and Vanessa sat with Marcus Sterling. Sterling was wearing a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. My parents looked pathetic. My father was using a cane I had never seen before. Vanessa was wearing a neck brace, claiming stress-induced muscle spasms. It was theater. Grotesque. Amateur theater. Sterling stood up for his opening statement. He paced in front of the judge, gesturing wildly. "Your Honor," he boomed, "this is a simple case of abandonment. Robert and Sylvia Prescott gave everything to their daughter. Danica. They paid for art school. They paid for her housing. They supported her dreams for a decade. And now that they are facing financial ruin due to medical bills and economic downturns, she sits in her ivory tower, mocking them, The law states clearly that a child with means must support destitute parents, and Ms. Prescott has means. He pointed at me. I didn't flinch. I stared straight ahead, my face a mask of boredom. My father took the stand first. He cried. He actually produced real tears. "We just wanted her to be happy," he sobbed into a handkerchief. "We never asked for anything back. But now, we are losing our home. I can't afford my heart medication, and she laughed at us. She offered to buy our debt like we were a business acquisition." "Thank you, Mr. Prescott," Sterling said softly. "No further questions." Elias stood up. He didn't pace. He didn't shout. He walked to the podium with the calm efficiency of an undertaker. "Mr. Prescott," Elias said, "you claim you spent your life savings supporting Danica's art career. Is that correct?" "Yes," my father sniffed. "Hundreds of thousands of dollars." "I see." Elias picked up a document from his table. "I would like to enter into evidence Exhibit A, a digital scan of a document presented to my client by the plaintiff on the night of January 22nd of this year." My father froze. "This document," Elias continued, "is an itemized bill totaling $418,000. It lists expenses such as braces, school lunches, and clothing. It was presented to my client as a demand for repayment. Is that your handwriting, Mr. Prescott?" That was just a motivational tool." My father stammered. "A motivational tool," Elias repeated. "You admit that you viewed your parental obligations as a debt to be repaid?" "No, let's move on," Elias cut him off. "You claim you are destitute because of medical bills, yet banking records show that in the last 2 years, you withdrew $200,000 from your savings. Where did that money go?" "Living expenses," my father lied. "Really?" Elias clicked a remote. A screen on the wall lit up. "Because these transfer records show the money going directly to an account held by a Kyle Miller. That is your daughter Vanessa's boyfriend. Is it not?" Vanessa went pale beneath her fake neck brace. "And," Elias continued, relentless. "Exhibit C, a forensic accounting of the estate of Eleanor Mitchell, your late mother-in-law." The room went silent. My mother gasped audibly. "According to bank records," Elias said, "Eleanor Mitchell had a savings account containing $80,000 intended for her granddaughter's education. 2 weeks before she died, while she was heavily medicated, that account was liquidated. The signature on the withdrawal slip is shaky, but the deposit went into the joint account of Robert and Sylvia Prescott, and the very next day, a wire transfer of exactly $80,000 was sent to a luxury car dealership for the purchase of a BMW convertible. For Vanessa." "Objection," Sterling shouted. "Relevance." "The relevance," Judge Holloway said, her voice icy, "is that the plaintiffs are claiming poverty caused by supporting the defendant. If they were actually looting a dying woman's estate to spoil the other daughter, that destroys their argument. Overruled." My father looked like he was going to be sick. He gripped the railing of the witness stand. We needed that car for appearances," he whispered. "For the business." "You stole from a dying woman," Elias said flatly, "and you blamed Danica for your financial ruin." Elias sat down. My father stumbled back to his seat, but we weren't done. "Your Honor," Elias said, "we have one final piece of evidence. It concerns the character of the plaintiffs and the true nature of their financial desperation." He held up a USB drive. "This is a recording taken during a dinner at Le Jardin 2 weeks ago. In it, the plaintiffs attempt to coerce my client into signing a fraudulent loan agreement to hide the embezzlement committed by Vanessa Prescott." "That is illegal," Vanessa screamed, jumping up. "You can't record us without permission." "Actually," Elias smiled, "in this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording, and Danica consented." He played the tape. My father's voice filled the courtroom, loud and clear. "It is just a vehicle to get the property into our name. You are never going to pay it back. It saves us from paying capital gains tax." Then Vanessa's voice. "You don't know anything about finance. Let the adults handle the money. And finally, my voice asking about the embezzlement and the terrified silence that followed. The judge listened, her expression darkening with every second. When the recording ended, she looked at Marcus Sterling. "Counselor," she said, "do you have any defense for this?" Sterling looked at his clients. He looked at the evidence. He started packing his briefcase. "I believe I need to recuse myself, Your Honor," Sterling said. "I was not made aware of these facts." "Sit down. Mr. Sterling," the judge snapped. "We are not finished." "Actually, Your Honor," Elias interrupted, "there is one more thing, a matter that specifically addresses the filial responsibility claim. The plaintiffs argue that Danica has a duty to support them because they are family. However, we have evidence that the family attempted to defraud my client in a way that severs any moral or legal obligation." Elias walked to the witness stand and placed a single sheet of paper on the ledge. "This," Elias said, turning to look directly at Vanessa, "is a loan application submitted to Shadow Finance, LLC, a high-risk lending institution. 3 months ago, the application is for a loan of $100,000 against the deed of the cottage owned by Danica Prescott." I looked at Vanessa. She stopped breathing. I hadn't known about this until Elias found it yesterday. "The application was rejected," Elias said. "Do you know why?" He looked at the judge. "Because the lender ran a verification check. The signature on the application reads, Danica Prescott, but the IP address used to submit the online form traces back to a computer registered to Ethelgard Global, specifically, the workstation of Vanessa Prescott." A gasp rippled through the gallery. "Your Honor," Elias said, his voice hard as iron. "They didn't just ask Danica for money. They tried to steal her identity. They tried to mortgage her home behind her back. When that failed, they tried to bully her. When that failed, they sued her. This is not a request for support. This is a predatory attack." Judge Holloway stared at the Prescott family. Her eyes were filled with a profound, unmasked disgust. "Stand up," she ordered them. My parents and Vanessa stood up. They were shaking. The cane fell from my father's hand and clattered on the floor. No one picked it up. "In 20 years on the bench," Judge Holloway said, her voice quiet and dangerous, "I have seen drug dealers, murderers, and thieves, but I have rarely seen a display of greed as repulsive as this. Your Honor, please," my mother wept. "We were desperate." "You are not desperate," the judge cut her off. "You are morally bankrupt. You have wasted the court's time. You have slandered your daughter, and you have admitted, on public record, to multiple counts of fraud, theft, and elder abuse." She slammed her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "Case dismissed with prejudice. I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay all legal fees incurred by the defendant. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcript of these proceedings, along with the audio recording and the evidence of the forged loan application, to the district attorney's office. You came here looking for money. You are leaving with an indictment." "No," my father wailed. He collapsed into his chair. "No, please, we will lose the house." "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "get your clients out of my courtroom before I have them arrested for contempt." The bailiff moved forward. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I looked across the aisle at the wreckage of my family. My father was staring at the floor, muttering to himself. My mother was sobbing into Sterling's sleeve. Vanessa was staring at me with a look of pure hatred, but behind the hate, there was terror. She knew the DA now had everything needed to put her away for a long time. I walked past their table. "Danica," my father croaked. He reached out a hand. "Danica, wait. We can appeal. We can fix this. Just buy the debt. Please, we accept the offer. Buy the debt." I stopped. I looked down at his hand. "The offer expired when you filed the lawsuit, Dad," I said. "I am not buying your debt anymore." "Then what will happen to us?" he whispered. "The bank. The men from the docks. I guess you will have to get real jobs," I said. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy doors swung shut behind me. muffling their cries. The aftermath was swift and brutal, because the judge had dismissed the case and referred it to the DA. The temporary stay on foreclosure was lifted immediately. The bank didn't wait. By the time my parents got back to the mansion, the locks were already being changed. I heard about it from Elias later that evening. The sheriff evicted them an hour ago, Elias told me over the phone. They were allowed to take one suitcase each. The bank seized the cars, the furniture, everything inside. It is over. Danica. Where did they go? I asked, looking out at the rain-slicked city. A motel on the highway, Elias said. But that is not the worst of it. What is? The men you were worried about, the private lenders, they saw the news. They know the house is gone. They know there are no assets left to seize. I felt a chill. And they are not the kind of people who write off a loss, Elias said. Your father is in a lot of danger, real danger, not the legal kind. I stood there for a long time. I had wanted revenge. I had wanted them to lose their pride, their status, their false superiority. I had wanted to strip them of the weapons they used to hurt me, but I hadn't wanted them dead. Elias, I said. I know, he interrupted. I anticipated this. You did. I contacted the bank holding the mortgage an hour ago, Elias said calmly. And I contacted the private lenders through an intermediary. What did you do? I told you I wasn't buying their debt anymore, Elias said. And that is true. You are not buying it. But Aura Creatives, well, corporations are always looking for distressed assets if the price is right. You bought the house. I bought the foreclosure rights, Elias corrected. For pennies on the dollar, the bank was happy to offload the toxicity, and I settled with the private lenders. I paid them 50 cents on the dollar to walk away. They took the cash and agreed to forget the name Prescott. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. So I own it, I said. I own the mansion. You own the mansion, Elias confirmed. You own the cars. You own the debt Vanessa owes to Ethelgard, which gives you leverage over her criminal case sentencing. You own them. Danica. Completely. They don't know yet. No, Elias said. They are sitting in a motel room thinking their lives are over. They think the wolves are coming tonight. Good, I said. Let them sweat for one night. Let them feel what it is like to be truly powerless. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I said, looking at my reflection in the glass, seeing the woman who had survived the fire and come out made of gold. Tomorrow, the landlord pays a visit, thinking that Elias had already secured the rights to the mansion. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, but the reality of foreclosure law is a messy, bureaucratic beast. Elias had bought the debt, yes, and settled with the private lenders, but the bank still had to go through the formalities of a public auction to clear the title. It was a technicality, but a public one, and my parents, desperate and delusional to the bitter end, showed up to watch. The auction was held on the front lawn of the Prescott estate. It was a humiliating spectacle. A for sale sign was jammed into the manicured grass where my mother's prize-winning roses used to bloom. Strangers were tramping through the flower beds, peering into the windows, judging the cracks in the stucco that my father had hidden for years. I arrived in a chauffeured black SUV with tinted windows. I didn't get out immediately. I watched from the back seat, hidden behind the dark glass. My parents and Vanessa were standing across the street, huddled together on the sidewalk like refugees. They looked even worse than they had in court. My father was wearing the same suit, but it was stained now. My mother was clutching a plastic grocery bag that probably contained everything she owned. Vanessa was staring at the house with a look of pure, unadulterated grief. I saw a man in a cheap suit approach them, probably an old friend or a distant business associate. My father had begged for help. They were gesturing frantically at the house, likely pleading with him to bid on their behalf, to save them, to keep the dream alive for one more day. The man shook his head, patted my father's shoulder with pity, and walked away. The auctioneer began his chant. It was a fast, rhythmic song of loss. Opening bid. At 1.5 million, do I hear 1.5? A developer raised his hand. 1.5. Do I hear 1.6? A flipper in a leather jacket raised a paddle. I watched my parents' faces. With every bid, they flinched. They were praying for a miracle. They were praying for the price to stay low so that maybe, just maybe, they could find a loophole to claw it back. 2 million, the auctioneer shouted. 2 million going once. Elias, standing near the front of the crowd in his immaculate charcoal suit, raised a single finger. 2.5 million, Elias said calmly. The crowd gasped. A jump of $500,000 was aggressive. It was a dominance move. It signaled that the bidder had deep pockets and zero patience. The developer looked at Elias, saw the cut of his suit, and lowered his hand. The flipper shook his head and walked away. 2.5 million going once, going twice. My father was straining to see who had bid. He squinted at Elias. He didn't recognize him. Elias was just a suit to him, a proxy for some faceless corporation. Sold, the auctioneer slammed his gavel down on a portable podium. To the gentleman representing Aura Creatives. My mother let out a wail that I could hear even through the insulated glass of the SUV. She collapsed against my father. Vanessa covered her face with her hands. They had lost. The house was gone. The last symbol of their status had been sold to a stranger. It was time. I opened the door and stepped out. The morning air was crisp. I was wearing a white suit, sharp, tailored, and unapologetically powerful. I walked across the street, my heels clicking rhythmically on the asphalt. My father saw me first. His eyes widened. He tapped my mother's shoulder. She looked up, her face a mask of tragic confusion. "Danica," she whispered. "What are you doing here? Did you come to gloat?" I stopped in front of them. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I looked at them with the detached professionalism of a landlord inspecting a tenant application. "I didn't come to gloat," I said. "I came to inspect my property." "Your property?" Vanessa asked, her voice raspy. Elias walked over, holding a thick file of paperwork. He stood beside me, deferential but imposing. "Ms. Prescott is the sole owner of Aura Creatives," Elias announced, his voice carrying clearly to the few neighbors lingering nearby. "The entity that just purchased this estate." My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked from me to the house, then back to me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The stranger who had bought his home was his own daughter. "You bought it," he choked out. "You bought the house." "I did," I said, "and the cars, and the furniture, even the wine cellar." A sudden, desperate light flooded his eyes, the same light I had seen in the penthouse, but brighter this time. He grabbed my mother's arm. "Oh, thank God," he breathed, a smile breaking through the misery on his face. "Thank God you saved it. You saved us." "I knew it," my mother sobbed, reaching out as if to hug me. "I knew you wouldn't let strangers take our home. You bought it to give it back to us." "You are a good girl. Danica, a good girl." "We can move back in?" Vanessa asked, stepping forward, hope transforming her face. "I can have my room back." "We are a family again," my father declared, straightening his tie as if the last week of humiliation had never happened. "We will pay you back. Of course, eventually, but for now." "Oh, Danica, I am so proud of you. Let's go inside. I need a drink." He turned toward the house, ready to march back in and reclaim his throne. "Stop," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. My father froze. He turned back slowly. "What?" "I didn't buy this house to give it back to you," I said. "I bought it because it is a prime asset in a recovering market, and because I needed a place to store my archives." "Archives?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "My art," I said. "The doodling. I have a lot of prints and equipment. I need space." "But where will we live?" my father asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. We have nowhere to go. Danica, we have no money. You can't just throw us on the street? I am not throwing you on the street, I said. I signaled to Elias. He pulled 3 documents from the file and handed them to me. I am offering you a housing solution, I said. And a job. I handed the first document to my father. This is a lease agreement, I said. You and Mom can continue to live in the house. You can stay in the guest cottage at the back of the property. The main house will be my office and storage facility. The guest cottage, my mother gasped. But that is where the gardener used to live. It is tiny. It has 1 bedroom. It is cozy, I said. And the rent is fair, $2,000 a month, deducted automatically from the allowance I am legally required to give you if I want to avoid another frivolous lawsuit. I am feeling generous, so I will provide a small stipend for food. But the luxury cars are gone. You get a bus pass. My father stared at the paper in his hands. He looked like he was holding a live grenade. And Vanessa, I turned to my sister. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. I also bought your debt from Ethelgard Global, I said. I paid the restitution in full. The criminal charges have been dropped to a misdemeanor probation because the victim me is no longer pressing for jail time. Vanessa burst into tears. Oh, thank you. Danny, I knew you loved me. However, I cut her off. You now owe me $550,000, plus interest. I handed her a document. It wasn't a lease, it was an employment contract. You need a job, I said. A real job, to pay off your debt. Vanessa looked at the contract. Her eyes scanned the text. Assistant, custodian, she read aloud, her voice shaking. Janitorial duties, packing and shipping, minimum wage. My art business is booming, I explained coolly. I ship hundreds of prints a week. I need someone to assemble the boxes, tape them up, and scrub the floors of the studio when I make a mess. It is hard work, honest work. You want me to be your maid? Vanessa shrieked. I was a director. I have a degree. You were a thief, I corrected her. And now you are an employee. You can take the job, live in the guest cottage with Mom and Dad, and pay off your debt slowly over the next, let's see, 40 years, or you can refuse, and I will reinstate the civil suit for the full amount immediately, which will violate your probation and send you to prison. I leaned in close to her. Get a real job, like your sister, I whispered. Remember telling me that... Vanessa recoiled as if I had burned her. She looked at the contract. Then at the house, she used to rule like a princess. Then at the guest cottage in the back, a servant's quarters. You can't do this, my father shouted. His face was purple. He tore the lease agreement in half. I won't sign. This is humiliating. I am Robert Prescott. I will not live in a gardener's shack on my own property. It is not your property. Robert, I said. It is mine. I won't do it, he screamed. I would rather die. Okay, I said. I turned to Elias. Revoke the offer. Call the sheriff. Have them removed from the sidewalk for loitering. Wait, my mother screamed. She lunged for the torn pieces of paper in my father's hands. Robert, stop. We have nowhere else. The motel kicked us out this morning. We have no money. She is mocking us. Sylvia, my father roared. Can't you see? She is laughing at us. I don't care, my mother sobbed. She turned to me, clutching my arm. We will sign. We will sign. Please, Danica, don't send us away. I can't be homeless. I am too old. I looked at my father. He was panting, his chest heaving. He looked at the mansion, the symbol of everything he had ever valued. Then he looked at the street, the cold, empty street where he was a nobody. He realized then that his pride was a currency that had no value in the real world. Fine. He spat the word out like poison. Fine. Give me the pen. Elias handed him a pen. My father signed the taped-together lease against the hood of my car. His hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible. Vanessa signed her employment contract without a word. She was crying silently, huge drops falling onto the paper, blurring the ink. "Excellent," I said, taking the papers back. I handed them a single key. "That opens the back gate and the cottage door," I said. "Don't try to enter the main house. The alarm code has been changed. If you trigger it, the police will come. And Dad?" He didn't look up. "Make sure you keep the grass cut," I said. "I don't want my property values to go down." I turned and got back into the SUV. As the driver pulled away, I watched them through the rear window. They were walking slowly, heads bowed, toward the small wooden gate at the back of the estate. They looked like ghosts haunting the life they used to have. They were safe, they were housed, they were employed, and they were completely, utterly defeated. 6 months have passed since the gavel fell on the front lawn, and the silence that now surrounds the Prescott estate is very different from the silence I grew up with. It is not the stifled, suffocating silence of secrets kept and emotions swallowed. It is the peaceful, rhythmic silence of a well-oiled machine. I am sitting on the limestone terrace overlooking the back garden. The morning sun is warm against my face, and a cup of Earl Grey tea steams on the table beside my tablet. From here, I have a perfect view of the south lawn, where the overgrown English ivy had threatened to strangle the oak trees for years. Currently, a man in a faded polo shirt and cargo shorts is wrestling with a gas-powered hedge trimmer near the perimeter wall. He stops every few minutes to wipe sweat from his forehead with a rag, his chest heaving with exertion. It is my father, Robert, a few yards away, kneeling on a foam pad in the dirt. A woman is aggressively pulling dandelions from the flower beds. She is wearing gardening gloves that are stained brown and a sun hat that has seen better days. It is my mother, Sylvia. They are not gardening because they have suddenly developed a passion for horticulture. They are gardening because the rent on the guest cottage is $2,000 a month, and their combined stipend from the state pension and the small allowance I give them barely covers food and utilities. We have an agreement, signed and notarized by Elias. For every hour of manual labor they perform on the estate landscaping, gutter cleaning, basic maintenance, I deduct $20 from their rent. It is a fair wage. It is, coincidentally, $2 more than the hourly wage they offered me to be a receptionist at my father's failed company. I watch my father struggle to start the trimmer again. The engine sputters and dies. He curses, kicks the dirt, and tries again. There was a time when witnessing this would have terrified me. I would have run down there, apologized for the equipment, and tried to fix it for him just to stop his anger. Now, I just take a sip of my tea. He will figure it out. Or he won't, and the hedges will stay overgrown, and he will have to work an extra hour tomorrow to make up the difference. It is not my problem. From the converted 3-car garage on the east wing of the estate, I hear a different sound. Zip, rip, thud. It is the sound of packing tape. I stand up and walk over to the garage. The doors are open to let in the breeze. Inside, the space that used to house my father's Mercedes and Vanessa's BMW has been transformed into the fulfillment center for Aura Creatives. Rows of metal shelving are stacked high with limited edition prints, canvases, and merchandise boxes. Vanessa is standing at the main packing table. She is wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans. Her hair, once blown out to perfection every morning, is tied back in a practical, messy ponytail. She does not look up when I approach. She is focused on the order in front of her. She wraps a 24 by 30-inch print of the Obsidian Citadel in protective glassine paper. She rolls it carefully. She slides it into a heavy-duty cardboard tube. She caps the ends. She slaps a shipping label on the side. Zip, rip, thud. She places the tube in the ready-for-pickup bin and grabs the next order ticket. I lean against the doorframe, watching her. She looks tired. There are fine lines around her eyes that weren't there 6 months ago. The arrogance that defined her posture for her entire adult life has evaporated, replaced by a slump of resignation. "You are behind on the international orders," I say quietly. Vanessa jumps slightly. She turns to look at me. There is no fire in her eyes, only a dull, weary acknowledgement of authority. I know, she says, her voice hoarse. The label printer jammed earlier. I am catching up now. Make sure you double-check the customs forms for the shipment to Zurich, I instruct. Last time, you forgot to declare the commercial value, and the client had to pay extra duty. I deducted that cost from your paycheck. Remember? I remember, she says, looking down at the table. It won't happen again. Good. I watch her turn back to the table. She picks up another print, a piece of art I created. A piece of art she once called garbage, and treats it like it is made of gold, because for her, this art is the only thing keeping her out of prison. Every tube she packs chips a few dollars off the mountain of debt she owes me. I walk back out into the sunshine. People might look at this arrangement and think I'm cruel. They might think I am enjoying their humiliation, that I get a kick out of seeing my high society family reduced to servants. But the truth is, I don't feel cruel. I don't feel sadistic glee. I feel balance. For 32 years, the scales were tipped so far in their favor that I was sliding off the edge. They took my labor, my self-worth, and my love, and they gave nothing back but invoices and insults. Now, the scales are even. They are working for their survival, just as I did. They are facing the consequences of their actions, just as I did. The greatest revenge isn't violence or screaming matches. It is simply letting them live in the reality they created. They told me my art was useless. Now, they eat because I paint. They have a roof over their heads because I create. They are alive because of the very thing they tried to kill in me. I walk past the driveway where a courier truck is pulling up to collect the day's shipments. The driver waves at me. I wave back. I get into my car. Not the dented sedan, but a vintage convertible I bought simply because I liked the color and drive out of the gate. I pass my father, who is now raking leaves near the entrance. He stops and looks at the car. He doesn't wave. He just watches me go, leaning on his rake like a tired peasant watching the queen ride by. I drive through the town of Oak Creek, past the coffee shops where my mother can no longer afford to show her face, past the country club that revoked their membership. I drive until the manicured lawns give way to the rolling hills of the cemetery on the edge of town. I park and walk up the familiar grassy slope. It is quiet here, a different kind of quiet than the estate. This is a holy silence. I reach the simple granite headstone under the willow tree. Eleanor Mitchell, beloved mother and grandmother. I kneel down and brush a few fallen leaves off the stone. I place a large bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, in the vase. Their bright yellow petals look like little explosions of joy against the gray stone. Then, I reach into my bag and pull out a magazine. It is the latest issue of Forbes. The cover features a collage of young innovators. But I flip to page 42. There is a full-page spread. The headline reads, "The New Architects of Reality, 30 Under 40, and New Faces." There is a photo of me. I am standing in my studio, wearing paint-splattered jeans, looking directly into the camera with a gaze that is calm, steady, and unafraid. The caption describes Danica Prescott as the visionary behind the most lucrative digital assets in the metaverse, a woman who turned a niche hobby into a billion-dollar empire. I lay the magazine open on the grass next to the flowers. I made the list. "Grandma," I whisper. The wind rustles the leaves of the willow tree, a soft, shushing sound that feels like a caress. I know I am 32, so I technically aged out of the main list. I smile, tracing her name on the stone. But they made a special category for new faces. They called me an anomaly. They said I came out of nowhere. I pause, fighting the lump in my throat. They don't know I didn't come from nowhere. I came from your kitchen table. I came from the paints you bought me when no one else would. I came from the nights you held me while I cried because I wasn't enough for them. I look out over the cemetery, seeing the town in the distance. I kept the promise, I say, my voice trembling slightly. I didn't let them extinguish the fire. I turned it into a torch, and now I am burning so bright they have to wear sunglasses just to look at me. I sit there for a long time, just breathing. I tell her about the house. I tell her about Vanessa packing boxes. I tell her that I am finally truly happy. Not the frantic happiness of a win, but the deep, abiding happiness of safety. We did it, Grandma, I whisper. We won. When I finally leave the cemetery, the sun is high in the sky. I drive back to the estate, feeling lighter than air. I park the car and bypass the house, bypass the garden where my parents are eating their lunch sandwiches on a bench, and head straight for the main house. I walk through the grand foyer, past the marble staircase, and into the ballroom. I have ripped up the carpets in here. I have covered the floor in drop cloths. The crystal chandelier is still there, but now it illuminates easels, work tables, and massive monitors. The air smells of linseed oil and ozone. I walk to the center of the room. A massive canvas sits there, blank and white and waiting. For the last 6 months, I have been busy being a businesswoman. I have been busy being a creditor, a landlord, a negotiator. I have been busy settling scores. But today, the scores are settled. The ledgers are balanced. I pick up a palette knife. I squeeze a glob of vibrant, electric blue paint onto my palette. It is the color of the sky in the world I built. I look at the blank canvas. I don't know what I'm going to paint yet. And that is the beauty of it. I don't have to paint something that sells. I don't have to paint something that proves my worth. I don't have to paint something to pay a bill or silence a critic. I am just going to paint. I step forward and make the first mark. It is a bold, sweeping slash of color. It destroys the perfection of the white canvas, and in that destruction, something new begins. My parents are outside, manicuring the world to look perfect. My sister is in the garage, boxing up the past. But I am here, in the heart of the house they worshipped, creating the future. They told me to be realistic. They told me to get my head out of the clouds. They told me that the world didn't care about my imagination. I look at the blue paint glistening on the canvas, and I smile. They told me to live in the real world, and the reality is, I own their world. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop a comment below with your city or country, and let me know what you thought of Danica's Revenge. If you enjoyed this journey, please make sure to subscribe to the Healing Drama Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people. See you in the next one.